Allow me to start with a quote. The passing of a statute which defines and describes the Australian national flag is an important event in the history of the nation. The flag that is now Australia's flag, which is based on the blue ensign, is a very beautiful flag. It is probably the most beautiful flag in the world. Now, that quote was from that famous radical extremist, terrible bigoted right-winger, former Labor leader, H.V. Doc Evatt, who said this in 1953, speaking in support of the Flags Bill, which established the flag that we currently have today as our national flag. But now look at us. Now look at our country. We now have a Labor leader and a Prime Minister who is so ashamed of our country and our flag that he will not even stand in front of it. We used to have leaders and a body politic that reinforced and supported mainstream Australian values, but now they're attacking them in a hostile takeover of our way of life. I'll give you 3 examples of this: our flag, and net zero and migration, which we've heard much of today. Quite obviously, a single nation can only be represented by a single flag. Now, there are those who say that a flag is just colour on fabric. Wrong, wrong, wrong. A flag represents our shared values as a community. It's what brings us together. It's what 103,000 ex-servicemen and ex-servicewomen have died fighting for. Now, obviously, as a nation, we are more divided than at any time since World War II. The share of our population born overseas at 1/3 is the highest of any comparable nation, and the sectarian and ethnic conflict is turning us into a nation of tribes. That is why it's important now more than ever that we have our shared values and symbols to unite us together. The Union Jack represents the institutions that we all share and connect us to one another, passed down from our British inheritance. Our parliamentary system of democracy, equality before the law, judicial fairness, and democratic representation codified in one person, one vote. The Federation Star represents each of the states, the coming together of those states to create a nation, and unique in the world, a nation for a continent and a continent for a nation. And the Southern Cross represents our place in the world, that Australia is not just an idea, but we are a real people in a real nation connected together. Unique also in the world, and something poorly understood among many, in part because of our school system, is that the flag that we love and is supported was a product not of politicians, not of the elites, but of the community. And attempts to change the flag have always been rejected and will always be rejected. An official Commonwealth flag competition was the world's first ever national flag design contest in 1900, which received some 32,823 entries, some 1% of the entire population of our nation at that time. And some 124 years later, support for our flag has never been higher. 71% of Australians believe our national flag unites us. 77% of Australians are proud of our national flag. And 75% of Australians want us to keep our national flag, while just 10% do not, which is, coincidentally, the same percentage of those who happen to watch the ABC. So in other words, hands off our flag. And Australians rightly expect that there will be consequences for the desecration of our flag. Now listen to this. 77% of Australians believe those who burn the flag, it should be criminalised. And that includes 76% of those aged 18 to 24. So don't tell me about Generation Woke. 63% of Australians want people who burn the flag put in jail, and 71% believe that non-citizens who burn the flag should be deported. But it's not just support for our flag, which is surging. So is support for our national day, Australia Day, which is on the 26th of January. Now, there are those who say that they want to change the date. But we know that they don't want to change the date because there is no date that they believe Australia should be celebrated on, because they don't believe Australia is worth celebrating at all. But I'm here to tell you that the 26th of January is Australia Day. Always was, always will be. But it's not just the flag that's under attack. We've seen and heard today talk, quite rightly, of net zero. And this is, quite simply, the greatest act of economic and social self-harm we have ever seen. But make no mistake, net zero is not just or even primarily about our energy system. Labor loves net zero because it is a vehicle for them to impose their hard left, quasi-socialist ideology on those of us who do not want it. It is about the food that we can eat, the cars that we can drive, the houses we can live in, the jobs that we can have, what is taught to our children at schools and universities. But not only that, many of you have lived the fact that net zero is destroying our regional communities, pitting neighbour against neighbour. The rollout of these high-tension, high-voltage transmission lines, solar factories and concrete wind towers is an act of environmental and social vandalism, funded by overseas countries, imposed by rapacious renewable corporations, subsidised by the taxpayer and cheerleaded by the left-wing media. And for a government that tells us they're concerned about bushfires, the cavalier attitude that they have to the fact that transmission lines and transmission towers are a bushfire accelerant and a human and animal health hazard tells you everything you need to know about this government's attitude towards those on the land. And for all the propaganda that we are subjected to, Australians don't want it. Only 1 in 5 Australians say that they believe emissions reductions should be the priority of energy policy. The other 4 in 5 say they want affordability and reliability. And let's not forget, for all the bleating of the Labor pollsters who get a free pass in the press, the Coalition, well, the Coalition took net zero to 2 elections. Last time I looked, they're not in government. Don't tell me net zero is a vote winner for the Coalition. Maybe it's time to try something different. And more to the point, we were told that the reason why the Coalition needed to take net zero to the electorate was to win or win back the very seats that they lost. People know that we're not fair dinkum when it comes to net zero. Let us now turn our attention to the matter of mass migration. As has been said today, quite rightly, and as you and I know, the fact that millions want to come to our great nation is hardly a surprise, because we are the greatest nation on earth. Of course you would want to come here. And every migrant who comes to our shores is a vote of confidence in all of us. But as I've said on a number of occasions, there are 3 components to a successful migration program. Firstly, it must be planned for. Secondly, it must have the consent of the community. And third, it must be targeted to areas of economic need. Plainly, this has not happened. The program has not been planned for, which is why we have an acute housing shortage and a lack of infrastructure. It does not have the consent of the community, who were never asked. Strong majorities of Australians want a cut, not an increase, with many wanting a pause on immigration intake until infrastructure catches up. And it has not been targeted towards areas of economic need. Our worker shortages remain over 1/4 above what they were pre-COVID, despite the fact that we have a record intake of migration. How can we have a record intake of migration and near record levels of worker shortages? Something isn't adding up. And for all of this, the government, for craven domestic political considerations, continues to push down on the accelerator. The rate of increase to net migration remains double what it was pre-COVID, despite promises by the government to cut. Now listen to this. Since the year 2000, we have had in this country a 43% increase to the size of our population. That's almost half an increase in a quarter of a century. This is the highest of any comparable nation. In New Zealand, it's been 38%, Canada 35%, the US 21%, and the UK 18%. Think about that. Our population growth has been more than double of the UK and the US. Now, the underlying issue here is Australians are being subjected to the worst form of a Labor government. We have been lucky in our nation's history to have at least one not terrible Labor Prime Minister, and that was Bob Hawke. But Bob Hawke was the exception that proved the rule. Bob Hawke was parachuted into Parliament at the 1980 election. Just 3 years later, he was elected unopposed as Labor leader, and just 5 weeks after that, he became Prime Minister. This meant Hawke was not as beholden to the sectional interests as many Labor leaders are. Now, yes, it is true that Hawke was a creature of the union movement, having headed the ACTU before entering Parliament. But the ACTU of the 1980s is not the ACTU of today. During much of Hawke's prime ministership, it was Bill Kelty who was the secretary of the ACTU, and for far from perfect, Kelty at least was nationally minded enough to help usher in some important economic reforms. The thing to understand about the modern Labor government that we have now, and the thing to understand about Anthony Albanese, he is nothing more than a sock puppet for sectional interests. We see that with the economy. We see it, as I say, with migration. And most disastrously, we've seen it with foreign policy. Now, let me make this point about the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party needs to stop being the party of controlled opposition and start being the party of the Australian people. But yes, it is true that we are, as it feels, living through one long national nightmare. But I do also come bearing good news. And the good news is this, as I alluded to before, Generation Z, the youngest generation coming through to vote, is the most conservative generation that we have seen since World War II. This is not a woke generation. This is a generation that has been lied to more than any other generation. This is a generation whose eyes are open to the corrupt and incompetent nature of our institutions. And we can see the pushback. And I just want to give you 3 examples of this from surveys that we have undertaken. The first relates to a question that we asked, which is, do you believe that the Australian national anthem should be sung at school assemblies? 70% of 18 to 24-year-olds believe it should be sung. Do you believe welcome to country ceremonies have gone too far? 79% of 18 to 24-year-olds believe they have gone too far. And do you believe that political correctness has now gone too far? 78% of 18 to 24-year-olds believe political correctness has gone too far. I am confident that the pushback is there from the youngest generation. It is our responsibility to make sure that we don't lose hope, that we don't lose fight, that in these challenging times it's more important than ever that we redouble our efforts, because we owe it. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren to pass our country down to them in at least as good a fashion as we received it from our parents and from our grandparents, because I can guarantee you the next generation is saying this: you ain't seen nothing yet. Thank you.